Okay, welcome everyone to week 36 of Viz Review, and hello Charlie.
Hi Eva, how are you this week?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, yeah, a solid 8 out of 10 this week so far.
Oh, how come?
I don't know, I'm just the kids are back at school, everything's got kind of nice because of that, so yeah, it makes things a little bit easier around the house.
Is it relaxed? I have to say, yeah, the house here is a lot quieter as well, but I'm just like, it's really quiet and strange because we haven't had it quiet for so long now. It's almost odd, but I've started reading again and trying new things for productivity and stuff, so it's been a good week here as well.
Cool, good.
All right. I say we go straight into our Viz review, right? Let me
Yeah,
bring
yeah,
up
again,
the Twitter. So I've seen lots and lots of visits this week. Great work, everyone, on just participating. I think we have quite a few new people, or maybe people who participated a while ago and haven't been around. I see the live chat is exploding, which is
oh,
great. We've got
God.
Michelle, Ali, Balaji, Ashik, Huanji, I think, Chimdi, Raina, Rohan, Lokesh, Sankalp. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Great to have you. So we'll start with, well, actually, I want to show the original Viz first because I think it was only last week that we mentioned if people have any suggestions of data sets, they can send them to us.
Oh yeah.
And Michelle, I wasn't surprised. Michelle sent me a link to this data set about the different cereals. And I said, great data set, is there a Viz as well? So her sons went to work and they have been watching this review actually. They've listened to our lessons and they went against everything and created this Viz. So we have something to make over. And I think they did pretty good.
They've done a very good job of highlighting a few worst practice things, so hopefully we'll see very few of these elements in today's missions.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been, there's a lot of points that people could look at here to be like, okay, this is something they should improve on or that, isn't great. So thank you again to Max and Sam. And hopefully they get a chance to watch the video I created because I took it literally this week. I took their Viz, downloaded it, and took it apart and put it back together in a makeover style. And I've created a video, so I hope they get to see that, because I thought I want to honor the work they've put in and just take this as a starting point. So now, let's start with Data Loy and their Makeover Monday submission. I don't know who's behind Data Loy. Let's see what name comes up. Aloysius Ong. Well, nice to have you join us. And I'm going to put this into... Oh, this is very big. I don't know if I'll bother with full screen, but let's see what that looks like. First impression, Charlie, what do you think?
Very first impression is there's a lot of text there, but skimming through it, it's all kind of good relevant text. So I need a bit of time to take it in. But it looks like it's a proper deep dive into the data. So I've been a bit slack this week and haven't really looked at it yet. I watched Andy's overview yesterday, so I know there's a lot of data in there. And it looks like Aloysius has not messed around and has done a real thorough overview of everything.
What do you think of the colours?
So it was the first thing that stands out because it's kind of the title's coloured, and so colour's being used for every cereal manufacturer, I guess is the right word. And I don't think you need to colour categorical data just because you've got categorical data. So in every case where there's a manufacturer, we've got the name next to it, so we don't really need the colour there. Maybe it might look a bit boring if it was just all the same colour, but equally, is it a bit too bright and colourful? Is it really important to have the colour in any of the charts apart from that very bottom bar chart? And even then, because there's a filter for manufacturer, I'd argue you don't really need the colour there either. So I think that's my main reservation, is the use of colour.
Yeah, I just had a thought because I think what the color does for me is that it distracts me from the text and the insight that he found. So it talks about, the number of products, but I mean, that's just the products in the data set. That's not necessarily how many products they have. I can't confirm how many they do have, but there's average amount of protein, there is the vitamins and minerals, and maybe there's a story there. We've got, maybe the story is all about Kellogg's, or it's all about General Mills, or whatever it might be. But the colors distract me from actually looking at the text, which I think is where there's some really interesting stuff in there. I also noticed that while he's put a lot of effort into putting all of this together, there's a few oversights, like count of sheet 1 dash serial is under the first chart. I don't know what that means. I think it's the new number of records that Tableau has. I think that's what this was in this data set. But I would suggest to, every chart seems to be a bit different size. There's some cut-off stuff. Make them all the same size because they all look the same. Tidy up the grid lines and the borders if you don't need them. And also just labeling the axes in a sensible way that is, easy for people to understand. So the first one would be number of cereals or different cereals by manufacturer or something like that. And then further down, it talks about sugar. So is sugar then the main story? I think this is to me, it feels a bit confused. It's like it's covering everything because there isn't one clear focus.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. And but I quite like, I've looked through the text now in detail, and there is quite a lot to take in. And I like the effort and the attention that's gone into it, because there's a lot of actual breaking down of, what does this actually mean within the context of me as an individual. So there's good work gone into that, I think. And the tone of it is quite cool. It could annoy some people because it's pretty like pally and casual, which is fine. But it's just, you've got to know your audience and decide whether it's appropriate. I think I don't mind that it's a deep dive and then it goes into almost every data point in there. I agree with you with the stuff like, just be careful with formatting. So get your axis titles right. And there's one that's, where was it? Just like the very bottom one. And this was actually the data set itself was at fault. So grams of sugars all in lowercase, should the G in grams be uppercase? So just tiny little nitpicky details like that that I would pay attention to. Possibly take on board the colour point, but overall it's good. It's very thorough. And if that was what the intention was, then it's fine. Just formatting attention is all I really feel this needs.
Yeah, and maybe in terms of the colour, as a suggestion, the colours are at the top. Maybe just encourage your reader to pick one one manufacturer, and when they click on it, that manufacturer is highlighted in one color. Everything else is, for example, gray or white with a black border or something, because then they can see the story for themselves. So if they click on General Mills, then in every chart, General Mills is a single color and everything else is a different color, because then it feels more like you're guiding them.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea, because then you massively reduce the number of colors, you get that focus, and that would make a big difference.
Okay. Let's jump to our next one. So I've tried to make it a real nice collection of lots of different types of charts. So if you created a scatter plot and we don't cover yours, there are so many scatter plots this week that just take our feedback from the other ones. So the next one is by Devipriya Prabhakar, and this one has a tile map, which I didn't quite understand. So, well, at first I thought it's a heat map, but it looks like it's not a tile map, a tree map. So, I'm trying to wrap my head around this one.
Yeah, so let's start at the top and move on. So we've got a sort of scatter plot, and I think it's sort of a scatter plot, isn't it? But then it's like discrete values along the bottom. So normally with a scatter plot, we'd say try and get the aspect ratio even, so it's square. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's necessarily as much of an issue when you've got the horizontal axis like this, but it says make sure that breakfast cereal is low in sugar and high in fiber, which is probably a reasonable statement to make. So we can see which product So this all bran product has got the most fiber and the least sugar, so that's kind of good. I'm trying to see what happens. So if you hover over a dot in that top section, the sort of nutritional information changes. So that's quite a nice bit of functionality.
I just find the title of the longer names is actually cut off. So the top left corner that is all bran with extra fiber is cut off. It doesn't fit into the box, unfortunately. The box on the right side.
Yeah, so I guess that use of that top chart is kind of fine, because you might look at a particular dot and think, okay, that's interesting to know for that cereal. Obviously, it doesn't allow you to quickly find your cereal of choice, so it might be a consideration to have like a highlighter or something like that to allow you to pick out your particular favorite cereal if you wanted to do that. So that's a consideration there. And then it is a tree map, isn't it, at the bottom? So it's just sized on the amount of sugar.
Could be calories as well, but could be. Oh, good question.
I think it's this crazy combination of the size is the calories and the colors the sugar.
Oh, yes, I think so. And when we talk about sugar, so I'm not 100% confirmed on this, but because it talks about complex carbohydrates and sugars, I believe that sugar is added sugar, and complex carbohydrates is the inherent sugar, like the stuff that's just ingrained naturally or in whatever ingredients they use. But sugar is added sugar, which is why some have 0 or 1 gram or something.
Yeah, so it almost feels like there's, again, I'm not a nutritionist, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. So, but it almost feels like there's two separate stories here. So I don't focus on the sugar and fiber aspect, because then you go down to calorific values and sugars as well at the bottom. It almost feels like you want to tell one story or the other, and I don't think that trying to have two separate metrics in a tree map is very intuitive, because you've got to get your head around the fact that size is one thing, colors another. So I think if you do want to plot all these different sort of metrics, then consider separating these two. So maybe have calories in a bar chart, I'm going to say, and then sugar in another bar chart or something like that, just to avoid that overloading of encoding.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this one here, it doesn't actually answer the question in the title. I mean, it says, make sure it's low in sugar and high in fiber. There's loaded sugar, but it's like, well, so what's the verdict? And we can't actually average it across all of those or make a blanket statement, because some are highly processed and some just are very, very simple. Like cornflakes themselves are actually reasonably simple. And then you've got oatmeal and oat bran, like they're probably as unprocessed as it gets in this data set. So, there's just so much variety that it's hard to make one definitive answer. But what I would have loved to get out of this one is which ones are the healthy ones and which ones are the unhealthy ones based on these parameters of sugar and fiber and calories. And the last formatting suggestion is that on the nutritional panel, it has the serving size in cups with 4 decimal points, and at the most it should be 2 decimal points. And what I tried but failed to do is to actually make it a fraction, because I think, if you have a cereal that says 0.67 cups, that's actually 2/3 of a cup, which is quite a common measurement. So I think it would be great to make it 2/3 of a cup rather than 0.67, because people are more comfortable, because that's what's written on their little measuring cups. So if you can figure out how to do that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and there's some general care needed in that table as well. And again, it's reflective of the data itself. So calories doesn't have its unit of measurement shown. Neither does vitamins and whatever the end of that is.
Minerals, probably.
Vitamins and minerals, because it's clipped in there. So just a little bit of attention to the general formatting of that table is needed.
Absolutely. Now we have, Hell-Raised Horror Gal, Christy Wentz. Let's check out her viz next. And there was a question from someone on the chat saying, I was wondering about, so this is by Hitesh, I was wondering about just one row which has -1 sugar, and that is from the oatmeal. Is that even possible? No, it's not. I mean, it can't have less than 0% percent or grams of added sugar. So I think that's actually incorrect in the data. And if you look up Quaker's oatmeal original, I think it's called, you will I think it just has like 0 grams of added sugar or whatever it has, but it's not -1. So you can correct that. You're welcome to do that.
I've spotted even that Andy's causing trouble again.
Oh my God, again?
Chat, so
am I the
see
only
how
one
that evolves. But what do you have for breakfast?
Me? I have typically oatmeal. Well, I would call it porridge here in the UK. So like nice baby oats, and I put sometimes I put seeds in it. I've kind of run out, so I just put a teaspoon or maybe even a tablespoon of peanut butter on top, and then I put hot, like boiling water on top, let it sit, and then I grate some apples and pears and put those on top and mix it all together. Or I have it with banana. If I'm feeling particularly indulgent, I put Biscoff on it. Biscoff and banana on oatmeal is absolutely outstanding. But on the warmer days, I tend to have smoothies. Like I love banana smoothie, green smoothie, just banana and baby spinach. Or sometimes just cold cereal. So basically the same oats, but just with milk instead of water, and, well, almond milk, and maybe some raisins or dates, lots of fresh fruit chopped up. What about you, Charlie?
Oh, see, this you're so healthy with stuff, and it makes me feel bad. So I think I'm reasonably healthy, but so I used to have cereal, and now I just have like granola with yogurt, and so it sounds kind of good, but I'm sure if I actually read the back of the packet, it'd be horrific. But I think it's better than me having Cocoa Pops. So
well, I should send you a recipe for homemade granola, which I used to make. I wouldn't consider it healthy because it has added oil and sugar, and fat and sugar together is like the most amazing thing for our taste buds, but it's also very delicious, but not so good for you. I think for me, it's just been refining my diet over time, and for me, breakfast has to be the healthiest meal of the day, because then I feel, completely ready to take on the day. And if I can just, be, I don't know what the English term is for when you kind of tell what someone has done that they might not want anyone else to know about, but Andy ate 10 cookies the other day.
Wow.
10 cookies. Yeah,
Jeez.
It's not particularly clever, is it? Okay, anywho, not for breakfast, I might say, but yeah, 10 is pretty bad. So, hang on. This was by Christy Wentz.
So, how many grams of sugar are in your cereal? So, we got this like sugar cube stacks, which are like images, I guess, that are nothing. I can't quite see where they fit in things. And then we've got my favorite, which is packed bubble charts. And what have we got? We've got two clusters of stuff. So what cereals have got more than 13 grams of sugar in? Okay. And then we've got, okay, which ones have got more than 3 grams of sugar in? So I don't get it. I don't understand why there's this like arbitrary line drawn between more than 13 grams or less than 13. So that's difficult for me to get my head around. And then it says more than 3 grams, but cornflakes is in there with sugars of 2, and Cheerios have got sugars of 1. So I don't know what the point of that section is, and I don't know if it's showing the right thing either.
I wonder whether that was just kind of like a big divider. I mean, because there seemed to be quite a lot below 3 grams and quite, and then a few above 13, but there still needs to be, I mean, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think, yes, 9 above 13 grams, and then maybe, I don't know, 15. I mean, like there's still quite a lot in the middle. I don't understand why those reference lines, I guess.
Yeah, and then continuing the theme of me not knowing what's going on, there's this protein to calories section underneath. So obviously they're measured in different units anyway, so whether you plot them on the same chart is questionable. But again, my lack of nutritional knowledge, it causes me issues here. But would it be normal to plot calories and protein on the same thing? Is there some sort of diet that is protein based that, I don't know, dictates whether you should have a certain amount? Because
all those what do they call those caveman things? What is it? The paleo diet. But then if you care so much about protein, would you eat cereal in the first place? Because by its sheer nature of being grain based, it would be full of carbohydrates.
Yeah, so I'm struggling with that bottom section. So, and then if I step back and say, all right, maybe my lack of knowledge is why I'm struggling with that section, then that's fine. And if we just critique it from a visualization perspective, I'd say the lack of axes is causing me a challenge, because this is all categorical data. So having categorical data plotted on a line chart, which you would assume is more of a continuous plot of something over time or something like that, doesn't really make sense for me. But I can't see what cereals they are unless I hover over stuff. So it sort of doesn't make sense to use that chart type of categorical data to not have any axes and to plot these two metrics side by side. So I'd say to Christy, what point were you trying to make? Because the top section talking about grams of sugar, the bottom section talking about calories and protein. But what's the message you want us to take away? Because the message I'm taking away is confused. I don't know what's going on.
I agree. And Sankalp actually made a good point. It should be less than 3 grams. The sign is greater than 3 grams, but it's all 3 grams. So it should be 3 grams or less. Yeah, I think this needs a bit of work.
Yeah.
But let's move on. And then we have Ashik. And I saw this one earlier this week. At first it made me think of what Andy created, but it has a different focus in the viz. It's just the same type of chart, but it's a different story. Choosing the healthy breakfast cereal. Now I'm intrigued what comes out of this one.
Okay.
It's important to read the ingredients list. Absolutely. Yes. Make sure limited sugar, less than 5 grams. I would say, ideally no added sugar, right? High fiber. Well, some typos here. We need more spaces. Limited sugar space. High fiber space. Add space. At least 3 grams per serving. Protein space. Okay, there needs to be a bit of tidying up. And size information space.
Okay, so it looks like Ashik's come up with a definition. So I don't know if this is a common definition, but the stance is if it's got less than 5 grams of sugar and more than 3 of fiber, then it's classed as healthy. So I don't know if that's like a fairly subjective appraisal of stuff, because what if these things are packed full of sodium and loads of the wrong sort of fats and hugely calorific, but they tick those other 2 boxes? So, I guess it's all right if you state your definition of healthy, but it's a consideration.
Yes. So what are we looking at? Okay, dietary fiber in grams. So that goes left to right. And then we've got sugar in grams, bottom to top. Now, 0 to 15 is like the scale is very different, even though we're looking at the same unit, which I don't understand. It should be square in this case, if I go just by the numbers. You're still there, Charlie?
Yeah, sorry. No, I think my children are gobbling up Wi-Fi again.
So if we look at the x-axis, the x and the y-axis are both 0 to 15. They're both in grams, but they're very different length, and they should be the same length if they're the same unit.
Yeah, there's no real need to do that unless there was. It's almost like the viz was shaped to fit a sort of a size that Ashik had in their head before doing it, or something like that. So I agree, you could square those up. But what I do like about this is by separating it into the manufacturer categories, you can see actually, if I look at Kellogg's, and it's a bit difficult because Kellogg's obviously have, I think, the most or the joint most products in this, but you can see quite a volume of products with a high sugar content there. So it's a nice at a glance way of seeing, actually, if you pick a random Kellogg's product, you're probably going to get quite high sugar content. So I like this chart choice for that that insight. And I guess if they were squarer, you might not have that pronounced an insight at a glance, because everything would look a little bit more squashed. So I guess if that's the angle of the story, it might be useful to have that slightly weird aspect ratio going on.
Yeah. it's a bit so one thing I would suggest is, because there is a bit of a definition here of healthy versus unhealthy, and there's a recommendation at the bottom. I mean, I'm fine with people giving recommendations, but because this is about health, maybe qualify this. Like, if the definition comes from some official source, that's great, put that in there. If it is your definition, I would put a disclaimer in there that I'm assuming you're not a health professional, and that people should take this as information rather than professional advice, because, some people might be like, well, a sheik said I should eat this, and now I got diabetes. It's not going to happen, but, I'd just be a bit careful, because certainly I have my opinions on food. I've honed them for many, many years, but I'd just be a bit careful and maybe make quite general recommendations or back them up with some authority, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's all about framing, isn't it? So you could say something like, if sugar content is your primary consideration when you're choosing a cereal, then this, and this, because you put that focus on that specific nutritional value, and you can draw attention, and then you're not risking misguiding because you're sort of leading it that way. So yeah, it's you've got to be very careful if you're with most data, really, if you're trying to make statements that you can't necessarily back up.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And I think when it comes to food, a pretty safe bet is to, if you want to make a recommendation, to talk about unprocessed food, because no one can argue that something close to nature, is worse for you than, within reason. But, if you say, well, oatmeal is healthier than some like highly processed cereal, you're probably on the safe side. Now, this next one by Rohan, I actually saw it, and at first glance I was like, really nice work. I like how he's worked in the picture, and then, so I saw it's all bran with extra fiber, and then I clicked on puffed rice, and the picture doesn't change, and now it doesn't look like puffed rice, and I'm confused / slightly disappointed, because I thought, how great would it be if now the cereal actually looked like what the picture and stuff. So my suggestion is to either have the pictures related to the cereal, or maybe just make your story about whichever one it was, all bran with extra fiber or something, because I think that works quite nicely. But as soon as people interact with your viz, the picture doesn't fit the data anymore.
Yeah, and it's that peril of functionality, isn't it? Because as soon as you hover over, or as soon as you click a bar, you get all the annotation backgrounds appear, and you get these big rectangular bits appearing on your screen, and makes it look a bit ropey. And then you get pedantic people like me who will say, well, you've got calories per serving drawing a line to like a bran flake, but you've also got grams of fat drawing a line to a bran flake as well, and you've got fiber pointing at a raspberry. And it's just a little bit strange. So I get that the idea is to say within this bowl of stuff there's this content, but you get people like me who'll just say, well, why is the line drawn to a bran flake or something like that?
And you have a good point, because also, those descriptions are pretty long, so it could be a lot more concise, I suppose. You've got vitamins and minerals not having a unit, weight in ounces, 1 dot, and then 000. Like I think there needs to be tidy up, and this is where we always talk about, do pay attention to these details, because they can kind of make and break your viz.
Yeah, and you've probably looked at the data and I haven't. This rating field, so there's obviously all this stuff about fat and sodium and all that sort of stuff. Is that rating field actually a nutritional value that they've said? So all bran with fiber sounds like it's probably quite healthy. Is that a thing, or is it like a consumer satisfaction or something like that? Because I'm assuming it's not going to be a general rating where kids have contributed and said, oh yeah, I love all bran, because there's no way kids are eating all bran.
Yeah, so it's not definitive in the data source, but they say it probably comes from consumer reports, which I'd imagine is probably a bit of a mix. I'm not 100% familiar with what consumer reports report, but I think they're similar to this German magazine called Test, where they test things and they rate them. So it's not necessarily the consumers rating them, but this independent company that gives it a rating. And I would assume they're rated based on their healthiness. Also, when I look at the top ones, they all seem to be the ones that don't really have the added sugar stuff.
Yeah.
And then when we go further down, I mean, I'm surprised that the oatmeal is rated 50 out of 100. I mean, that should be at the very top. But because also it's got much more flavor than brand stuff, at least in my opinion. But then when you go further down, you've got Captain Crunch, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, all the really high processed, high sugar stuff. So I would imagine it's based on nutrition.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think basically everything we've said already kind of covers where we are. And I think the balance is a bit wrong as well, because like that bar chart on the left is the area where you've got like a logical sort sequence, so you can see how all brand rates compared to grain weight and all that, all these other different products. But all of the breakdown around that bowl is pretty hard to actually digest, because you can't flick from one product to another and make a quick comparison. So there's an element of, I can see why the bowl's there, but it's a bit of window dressing. There's no real benefit to having it there, which is a bit harsh.
Yeah, I think a lot of effort has gone in, and I think it's a good way of incorporating the picture in terms of the design, but it's just not all that necessary, unfortunately. Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
I've been trying to follow the chat a bit, and people are making me very hungry, actually. There's a lot of talk about cookies and the suggestion that Andy should record himself making cookies. So I will do some encouragement there. So that he can share his cookie recipe with us.
I think there's more chat than the cricket last week. I thought the cricket was fairly busy.
Was pretty lively, yeah.
Yeah.
So here we have a viz by Yomisola, and I don't think I've heard that name before. So if this is your first time, let me check. Quickly flick back to us, but this is. Oh, it doesn't say whether it's the first Makeover Monday, but I guess we could have a look in the profile. But let's first look at the viz. So we've got a kind of a scatter plot at the bottom, and then we've got a kind of a bar chart at the top. So this is the guide to choosing a healthy cereal for breakfast. And then it says Quaker Oats, but then there is all these other ones. So
yeah, and it's hard to know what that value is, because so Captain Crunch is there with a value that, okay, so that's calories, is it? Okay, this is showing calories.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me.
Yes, and then the sort order's a bit wanky. Like it's just like all over the place. So we've got, it's like 120, 120, something like that. Drops right down for puff rice, and then jumps right up again for Quaker Oat squares. So I can't figure out what the sort order is. I think it's alphabetical, but then it's okay. And so that's a subset. So these are the products that are made by Quaker Oats, and then if you go to Kellogg's, it's probably going to be alphabetical. I know, then there does seem to be a sort.
There seems to be, sometimes they're sorted, sometimes they're not. And it looks like Andy agreed to the video. So the top bar chart really confuses me, because I don't even know that this is about calories. I can only see that when I hover. So I would strongly suggest to make it very clear. And then how is this a guide to choosing the healthy cereal? Because I don't see much guidance. There is something in the bottom that says it must be below 5 grams of sugar. It should be 5 grams of sugar per serve. It must contain more protein. What's more protein? Oat is recommended. How do I know if oat is in there? Like if it's in the name?
Yeah.
And the summary also doesn't seem to be the conclusion of those points or the data. So I find this not a helpful guide, because I don't get much guidance.
Yeah, it needs a lot of sort of reordering, doesn't it? Because so the top chart, we don't know it's about calories, so that needs to be made more clear. I wouldn't have the manufacturer filter underneath that chart, because that first chart is kind of the first thing you see. So you want the audience to probably drill in onto the manufacturer first before seeing the chart, because then they'll get a better sense of what's going on. And then you've got the summary, which again should probably be a little bit higher up. And like we discussed on the last thing, we can't really make statements that as definitive as this. So you could again rephrase it to frame it and say something like, if you were to consider this, this, and this as important when choosing a cereal, then these might be the ones you choose. This feels like it's a forced definition, and I don't know that this allows me to choose a healthy cereal, because I can choose a manufacturer. For some of them, it seems to be sorted in descending order. Some of them it isn't. But what do I do? Do I pick the one with the lowest calories and say that's healthy? I can then like select it and it will filter the chart below, but then I lose all the context. So it's a bit jumbled.
And what if this guide, so I get the idea of creating a guide. I think that's a cool idea. So what if this guide started with, assuming the audience has some sort of favorite cereal or they know these cereals. So maybe the guide starts with, what manufacturer do you typically eat from, or do you like, and you pick a manufacturer, or just say, pick a manufacturer. And then it gives you all the cereals they have. And then it just highlights in 2 different colors, the ones that are low in sugar, maybe under this 5 grams of sugar, whatever arbitrary value, and the ones that are above. And then maybe the next suggestion is, okay, out of the ones below, these ones are higher in protein or lower in protein, higher in calories or lower, but also considering what's the serving size, because some of them might state they're low in sugar, but the serving size is like 3 tablespoons. And who eats 3 tablespoons? I mean, for me, the serving size is 1 cup at least, because I'm hungry. And I just think that's how they trick us, right, in marketing. So I think if it's meant to be a guide for me to choose something, I have to be guided through the different steps of, this is how I come to the conclusion of what I should eat.
Yeah, and then alongside that, there is just some fundamental viz issues we've got. So we've already talked about, what's that top one about? We know it's about calories because we've stumbled across it, but make the axis title reflect that it's calories. Then that top section is too small. Every single product name is clipped, so I can't see it. So just take a bit more care when choosing a chart type. And similarly, at the bottom, we've got these, 6 different metrics, but the titles are rotated 90 degrees, so I can't see any of them. They're all clipped apart from fat. So, and you can see this. I can't imagine that this appeared on screen before it was published and looked perfect. So if you can see these obvious mistakes, just correct it before you publish it, because it doesn't reflect well on the level of attention you pay to what you're doing. So just take care.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll move on. How much time? Okay, we're good. So the next one actually stood out for me. Oh, this has data fan feedback. I shouldn't have included this, but we're going to go for it anyway. I haven't seen much in terms of data fan feedback this week, so we'll just go through this. Because I thought the design, I'm not normally a fan of images, but this is quite clever, right? With the box and the cereal falling out of it.
Yeah, it's quite sneaky, isn't it? And we've always said, if I speak for myself, I've always had a fairly harsh view on stuff, but when it's done all well, it works. And this one, the image complements the topic and it complements the chart choice. So Monica's managed to make these a circle chart look like cereal. So it totally works on that basis. Again, I'm always such a nitpicker. The image has obviously got, oh no, it hasn't. That's so good. Yeah, I assume that those bigger circles were actually from the image, but they're not. So Monica's done a very good job of sneaking everything.
They were too, but they are smacks. So I guess are they like the worst offender, or why are smacks?
It's because there's this
okay.
Yeah, that's very cunning.
That's very clever. I like that a lot. That's very cool.
And this is what we've talked about. So with some of the earlier ones, we've said, well, how can I choose my favorite cereal or see where it is and understand how it rates against everything else? And this is completely addresses that, and it's quite good fun to interact with in that way. So I think what it's really crying out for, if you were to really make it complete, is obviously in each of these columns for each of these categories, there's the same number of products. So it might be nice to say all bran rates 5th for protein or whatever it is, just so you can visually see it, but it's reinforced with an actual big ass number at the top of each column just to make it really drill it home.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to say, so what I really like is, and I've tried to do that in my viz as well, to make this sugar content more relatable. Because especially, we're talking about US cereal brands and types, and so I'm personally addressing a US audience, but we're having a metric system here, which I love, but a lot of people might not be able to relate to that. So she has put in, some cereals contain as many as 4 cubes of sugar per portion. 1 cube of sugar is 4 grams. Also, that's the same as 1 teaspoon, which also could be a good reference point. Now, the one thing I would suggest here is per portion and then in brackets 30 grams. I believe the 30 grams relates to the portion, but some people might think, oh, but 4 cubes of sugar, 4 times 4 grams is not 30 grams. So it might be confusing. I don't know how to really resolve it, but just something to think about, that the portion size is meant to be 30 grams. And that comes back to my point, like 30 grams is a very small portion. No one ever eats 30 grams. So it could be that you could even say something like, you know, a lot of people actually might eat 2 or 3 of the portion sizes as 1 portion. So they eat even more sugar. You know, 4 teaspoons or 4 cubes is a lot. And if you eat 3 times that because you eat a whole cup, then you obviously consume a lot of added sugar in the morning straight away.
Yeah, but this is a really good example of one where it all blends together nicely. So it even looks like it doesn't necessarily look like it's image overlaid with data. It almost looks like a seamless thing. So it's a good job from Monica. I think she got
I agree. Well done, Monica.
Yeah.
Okay. We have so much to say. We're not making the fastest progress, but hopefully people are still enjoying it and learning quite a bit. And yeah, okay. So the next one is from Preeti, Cereal Aisle Psychology. And I love that this is a take on different part of the data, because we had the position of these cereals, bottom shelf, middle shelf, top shelf, with relation to, you know, like where they're placed, which also indicates probably how much they cost. Because at the bottom shelf, you typically have the cheaper stuff, maybe the less processed stuff, because the more processed and the more manufactured, the more they spend on advertising. Because, you know, like, how often do you see oatmeal advertised versus Kellogg's? And I don't even know some of these, the different types, but there's a lot more marketing around the really unhealthy stuff. So you probably see that on the top shelf. Okay, what do you think of this one?
I'm trying to marry up the statement at the top with what we can see here. So like on the bottom shelf, so it says the bottom shelf generally, and so it's saying generally, which is a bit of a caveat, it's generally filled with colourful boxes of stuff for kids. But I'm seeing shredded wheat and bran, shredded wheat, more shredded wheat, Special K, Quaker oatmeal. A hell of a lot of that stuff is not what I would consider kids stuff. So it's just like corn flakes and things like that. There's a little bit of kiddie stuff. So I'm just wondering if it actually marries up with what the title's saying. So it's just because I'm that sort of person. I'm the annoying person that always tests a statement that's made, and I just don't know that this actually shows what the title suggests.
So, okay. So the top shelf targets adults, bottom is filled. Okay. Well, I mean, and maybe this is a bit different in the US. I mean, at least from my experience in Germany, the bottom shelf, like the stuff that's hard to reach, is typically the cheaper, the no-name stuff, and then the stuff at eye level is the more expensive stuff they'd want you to buy because it's convenient to grab. So I don't know if this would be the same. I mean, there's certainly, at least at the checkout in German supermarkets, there's all the stuff for the kids who sit in the shopping cart or trolley and just grab things and throw it in the basket. But interesting question. I mean, I would imagine that Preeti has looked at this, because there was a bit in the article as well about this positioning. But I find the challenge with backing the statement up is, well, we don't know what the box looks like. Maybe, and this is maybe a bit going over the top, but because there's a viz in tooltips here, you could actually go to the effort of creating a link to every single cereal, so it pops up in this viz in tooltips, because currently the top shelf, like this is all very colorful because it's colored by manufacturer. But what if that were a lot more kind of dull? And as I hover over, I see a picture. I mean, I generally don't like having all those pictures, but if it's in the Viz and tooltips, then I could see whether your theory is actually correct, I guess.
Yeah, and it is quite a difficult one to get your head around because so the numbers in the middle of each square are their ranking. So I asked earlier, and we had that all brand with all the fiber thing was ranked number 1, 93 point something, I think it was. That's there, and I look at it. It's almost like a periodic table looking at this, and you sort of think, why have I got number 1 in the top of the top row, and then the second ranked thing is down in the bottom shelf, and where's the third one? It makes my eyes rove around trying to spot stuff, and you try to understand, or I try to understand patterns in stuff with where numbers are, and this is quite pattern free. It's a bit dotted around, and it distracts me a little bit because so I find myself trying to trace the rankings, which is difficult. You've got the distraction of color, which relates to the manufacturer, which it's useful because you can use the legend to highlight where all the Kellogg's things are and all the Nabisco ones are. But again, it feels like, because there's loads of cereals in scope here, it does feel like it'd be quite useful to have a summary which said, when I highlight Kellogg's, that, I don't know, 20 of the 40 brackets on the top shelf are Kellogg's, which is half of all cereals on that shelf or something, just to summarize it, because at the moment, I don't know what is visualizing that whole top section. It's a bit of a weird concept.
I agree. Shall we move on? I'm just a bit mindful of time to make sure we have a bit of time for the others, because the next one is by Agatha, and she's gone all kind of like bump chart, very, very designed, and it doesn't look anything like the other visits we've had, which are much more, colorful, much more kind of cereal stuff. And I want to make sure we have enough time to cover a few more visits. Okay. So, and she said, let me just jump back to the tweet. Inspiration from Imperatus Viz. So that's Tamas Varga, his World Happiness Viz. And then, okay, Kevin Flurlich and Judith Becker for the other stuff. Okay. What do you think of using a bump chart to go across these different, I guess, attributes or category, or the categorical data of the nutritional value of cereal?
It's kind of like it's the compromise you make with bump charts, isn't it? Because I'm trying to work out if I look at sugar, I've got all brown at the top with no sugar, and then that drops down to there, 15. It's the compromise you make with a bump chart or anything that uses any sort of ranking, where you lose that magnitude between the different things. So I think as long as it's positioned in a way where you let the audience know that they're not going to get that sense of, actually, this has only got 1 gram of sugar and the next one's got 15. If that happened, I think as long as people know that, then it's fine. I think this is quite a good way of, because there's a lot of information, I think this is a decent way of shoehorning it all in without it being too overwhelming.
Yeah, I like it now that I'm starting to explore it. What I would suggest to add is some explanation of how the ranking comes about. So with sugar, for example, if you being the cereal box want to rank high, your sugar content has to be low. If you want to rank high on fiber, your fiber content has to be high, because different things it's good to have lots of or not a lot of. And I would just put that somewhere, just to say, hey, we want low sugar, we want high fiber, we want low fat, we want probably, proteins like meh, but also calories. Personal opinion, I think a lot of people want like low calorie in everything they eat, but then they wonder why they're never satisfied, because we do need a certain amount of calories to just kind of exist and be full. And if you consider, let's say, 2,000 calories across the day, well, if it's 3 meals, that's about 700 calories per meal. And if your breakfast cereal only has 250 calories, it's like, okay, are you surprised you want cookies at 10 a.m.? So I think with calories, I'd be actually a bit more conservative and say, I wouldn't worry so much about that. It's more the nutritional makeup, because if something has a lot of complex carbohydrates but not a lot of fake things in it, it's still going to be fairly high in calories if you want to be satisfied with a decent sized portion. But it shouldn't rank really low because of that, because you've got to eat something and you've got to like get some energy in.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point about, is it good to be in ascending or descending order? And the only sort of concession that Agatha's made to showing that is this healthier arrow thing up on the right, so that, and less healthy at the bottom, so that it's there, but it's a bit hidden. So I think if she were able to call these things out a little bit more clearly, it would make for a great viz, because it's we've had a lot of colourful stuff and we've had a lot of disorganized stuff today. And with Agatha, when you look at stuff, I personally breathe a sigh of relief, because it just feels calm and clean, and I'm very pleased to see it.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. Okay, the next one is also a bit purple from Kamal, and maybe we can go a bit quicker through the next few so that we can cover a few more. And we've probably said a few things, but I guess what confused me here was the amount of purple, because purple isn't something I'd necessarily associate with cereal. In this case, because of how much purple there is, my first thought might be in a UK context, maybe healthcare, or it could be something like breast cancer. It's a lot of purple. Why purple for breakfast cereals? But maybe I've missed something, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. I think there's a bit of it. Colours are a bit faddy, aren't they, in data viz, and it's a popular one at the moment. Mm-hmm. I think in addition to that, this selector brand section is pretty big, isn't it? It's like, I don't know.
It takes up about a third or maybe a quarter of the viz.
It's quite wide, and you really don't need it, because data's got to do the talking for you. You don't want something that's a filter or a parameter taking up all the space. So I'd lose that and come up with a more compact way of allowing people to filter stuff, because it's huge.
Yeah. And I'd always suggest, when you create a bar chart, in this case it's a vertical one, and I have to tilt my head to read the labels, especially because they're in the bottom right corner. So the shortcut for that area of the screen would be to tilt my head to the right, but then it's literally upside down. So I would encourage everyone to make sure that your labels are always super simple to read, which means horizontal or at least diagonal, because this is too much effort for me, so I'm going to just ignore it. But you don't want me to ignore it. So you could rotate your viz, and if it's then too big, well, maybe if you squish up this selector brand and it just becomes half as tall, you would actually have space somewhere else for this bar chart.
Yeah, and then the scatter plot's a bit difficult to understand as well, because I've just taken far longer than I should have done to figure out what the x-axis is, because it's not labelled. So you can tell sugar is on the y-axis, so that's cool. But I was trying to work out what's going on. I think it's fibre.
I think it's fibre as well, if I hover over the tooltip, or to get the tooltip.
Yeah, so just a little point there, but label your axes, because it's just... people don't want to waste time trying to understand what they're looking at. They want to be able to glance at it, which sort of echoes what you said about that bar chart. Just spin stuff around, make sure people aren't tipping their heads.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have, I don't know the name, but let's see if we can come up, because Lino is maybe not the name. It is Lino Patnaik. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a bit now. So when I see a viz like this, where there's like these kind of boxes, or what would you call it, like segments in a dashboard, my first question is why? Because the default in Tableau is a white background. This requires effort to add all these kind of sand-colored boxes that aren't actually that appealing on the eye. They make the colors on top look very different. To me, I mean, okay, I'm going to download this because I want to show people I'm going to do a quick makeover. Because I'll let you talk and give your feedback for now, and I will bring this up in Tableau.
Cool. So Yeah, so the fragmented bit is good that you called that out because I was going to say that. The second sort of panel says it's got two statements again, and we've talked about this already, but how can you make a statement like some of this stuff? So it's saying that be wise to choose fiber and protein content breakfast cereals. Tell me why. You can't just make a statement. Tell me why that. And then underneath it says the best cereals are high in fiber and low in sugar. Well, are they? Why is that? You can't just make a statement in that way. And then the first chart says top 10 fiber content with sugar content data. So it's not worded amazingly, but even if we let that slide, what does it actually mean? Because the sugar content for all bran is obviously really, really low. So it's not the top 10 cereals for sugar content, but it does have really high fiber content. So I don't know how Linu has decided this mix of stuff. It's like we've got a combination of the stuff with the highest sugar plus the odd one here or there that's got the highest fiber. It's just like a really weird jumble of things to select what goes into the chart.
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit confusing. So let's try and clean it up just visually. Okay, now here's the funky thing again. We have to go to layout. The first thing I'm going to do is just get rid of all this shading. And thankfully, none of the text is white, so I don't even have to change the text color. And now I have to go to format and that. I mean, it already, to me, looks... Come on. Where's my shading? Oh, why? See, this is confusing for me. Why sometimes I have to go to the sheet thing and sometimes I don't. Ah, here we go. Background, none. So I'm just gonna get rid of all this shading first because I think sand color also is, if it was like a really light gray, I think I'd be totally fine because it can sometimes be a bit easier than a stark white, but let's just make this white. Then I see these big bubbles and my first instinct is, why not a bar chart? So let's change it to bars and let's put that on columns. And then the name, let's in one fell swoop get rid of the color. We'll sort it. We'll get rid, this feels like a deja vu from earlier today. But let's get rid of the grid lines and we can get rid of the axis rulers and then we can have a proper zero line. And maybe, what color would you suggest? Let's go back to the dashboard and just see what that looks like. Okay, we can also get rid of the header. Oh. I think the whole thing also needs a bit more space. And automatic. Okay, very small font, 8 points. You're allowed to make your dashboards a bit bigger than this. So I think a bit wider and certainly a bit taller. Just give the whole thing a bit of space to breathe. And I don't know what color, but I'm almost tempted to bring the sand color back, but in a more fun way. What if we use like a kind of a goldeny yellow? Ooh, that's intense. Okay, I'm gonna go for orange. Okay, so we have orange. There's some weird borders, I think, around that. No borders. Okay, we've got our black font, and he's actually gone to the effort of making these all caps, which is quite impressive. I'm gonna just okay, so let me get the whole thing to be Arial. If Lena wants Arial, we're gonna do Arial, but we're gonna just do kind of plain Arial to make it a bit easier on the eye. And then the title can be a bit larger. Maybe we'll make it bold, that's fine. Top 10 fiber content cereals with proteins and calories. Well, it doesn't say anything about, no. Top 10 cereals. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave that because that's just gonna be a bit too much. But I think the other, the one at the bottom, we've got these like two axes. We've got a line chart going across categorical data, which I don't really understand. And then we've got the the bars at the top. What are we going to do with this one?
Well, to be honest, I don't understand how it fits in with everything else, because I've already said, we've got a top bit that talks about fiber and protein, but then we've got a chart that talks about fiber and sugar, which does tie into the top. This bottom chart talks about fat and carbs, which isn't mentioned above. So everything just feels a bit disconnected. So I'd almost be inclined to chop it, get rid of it, because it doesn't tie in with anything that's in the rest of the viz.
All right, let's do that. And then the next one, let's just flip that upside down, but that's a dual axis. And there's, I mean, a line chart, a line across, what is that one? Okay, because we talked about fiber, let's keep it at fiber. And what's going on with the size? Let's make those normal. Let's also sort them. And the grams of dietary fiber, I mean, we don't even need the color there, because we already have these bars that indicate, you know, kind of what it is. Now, if I can find that orange again, more colors, just copy that, and then this one. Okay, because then they're at least a bit consistent, I think. Now I need to get rid of my grid lines, even though it says none, but let's say none again. And my axis rulers, and then the zero lines can be solid. Okay. Now we have 2 bar charts. I would make them consistent in terms of, you know, where the labels are and stuff, but I don't want to spend all that time now. But I mean, font size 8 makes me squint on my mix screen. I think I mean, even 9 I find kind of offensive, because it's still quite small. So I would say, if it's a title, make it at least 12. Maybe make it bold if you like. And then we've got fiber, content in grams. I think that could actually say grams. Because GMS might not be meaning anything to anyone. So we've got that. And then this text here, I'm not going to correct it now, but I think it's fine if that's actually a bit bigger and, you know, maybe a bit more punchy or something. And I'm actually going to move this text bit to the bottom, because then the bars are kind of the same. And we're going to make all of that centered, and let's just, I don't know, put in a pipe, so that it's just a single line, because 3 rows actually take up quite a bit of space. Let's make it 9. Okay. Now, that's my viz, or my little makeup. Now, okay, this one is a bit big. Maybe we'll get rid of the axis and instead, didn't I just say height? Okay. And instead, I mean, there's still a bit of stuff I would do, but anyway, you know what I mean. Put some numbers on the end. But I would say a bit clearer than the previous viz. Okay. So
yeah, it just simplified it and given it a bit of focus. I think, yeah, it just needed to be reeled in a bit.
Yeah, and that's taken up a bit of time, so let's move on.
Do you think we should jump to, because I know Michelle did her version.
Yes, let's look at what Michelle did. Let me scroll up. Okay. Yeah, here we go. I'm gonna let you start. I've talked quite a bit just now.
Okay, so make good choices. Who makes the best cereal choices in our family? So we can see different names, so different colour for every member of the Freeman family. And how do our favourites rate? So we can see from that sort of dot plot that Max's favourite only has a rating just around the 20 mark. Sam's is 58, and all brands at the top end. So actually the Freeman family generally have got some pretty low rated cereals, and actually Sam, who Michelle didn't expect to have a highly rated one, is the best in the family using these ratings. So yeah, it's nice, isn't it? She's made it personable, because you talked about relatable data earlier and how you use sugar and making it a more relatable metric. And for her family, she's made it really clear, so you can see how everyone's favorite cereal compares for sugar and for saltiness. So Max likes stuff with a high salt content, and he's fairly middly for sugar. And it's just nice and clean, isn't it? It's got good consistent use of color. It focuses on a couple of things rather than everything. And it's nice. And there's only one thing that I think I'd call out, is that there's a statement at the bottom that says about Max and make better choices and stuff like that, but it's coloured orange, which, oh no, that's cool because it's referring to Max. So yeah, no, it's all good.
Yeah, I think it's a fun take on, you know, their personal preferences, and I have to admit that some of these I don't even know, but they probably do exist where I grew up. They just have different names because Germans might not necessarily, you know, relate to the US names. I don't know what the cereal called Life is. No idea. But it's interesting to see, you know, the choices and stuff. The one thing I would critique is that I find the font at the top a little bit hard to read, at least the all caps section. It's a nice font, but it's a bit bold for me, so it's just a bit harder to read. And there's quite a bit of color going on, so maybe instead of stay away from the dark side, Max, that could maybe be just white font, but maybe as a call out linked to those two orange bars, so maybe it's between the two bar charts and it has like little lines going to them.
Yeah.
And then the purple text on black I find quite hard to read. Didn't see it coming, but Sam's favorite has the highest rating, so maybe again there could be white text but a connection to that kind of purple dots in the dot plot at the top. And just to make it just a bit easier, because you've got kind of white blocks of things, but then the other colors I would tone it down a bit. And I don't know if those are, you know, people's favorite colors, you know, because I think Michelle loves pink, and maybe Sam and Max love purple and orange. But if it's not, if people aren't particular about the color, then I would maybe choose color combinations that are just a bit less strong, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe something that's a palette that's just a bit like more simple, where, you know, it's not like purple, orange, blue and pink, but something a bit lighter or something.
What do you think about, just looking at the bar section, and it's quite a selective group, so it's the 4 favorite cereals in the family, and then it's the highest rated overall and the lowest, which explains why you've got such extreme variants on those bars. So you've got like Count Chocula with tons of sugar, and then you've got All Bran and stuff like that with 0 grams. So I don't even know what point I'm trying to make, but it's like it creates a slightly skewed context for the favorite cereals, because it almost makes them look bad, because it's sort of saying, okay, compared to Count Chocula and stuff like that, we're not wildly away from that worst cereal, if you like, in the top section. And you look at these zeros underneath, and it sort of misrepresents the selection by honing in on these specific things. I don't know that there's a solution, and obviously you can't have dozens and dozens of cereals and make such a concise viz, but it's just something that is nagging me, and it's a bit crap to say I don't know what the solution is, but it's a consideration.
And I agree there, and I have seen lots and lots of scatter plots this week, so I'm not going to suggest, I will suggest, what if there was a scatter plot that has sugar and salt, and because then every choice is only there once, and you see it in the entire context, so everything else is maybe white, or, you know, black with a white line, or something kind of subtle for context. And just on sugar and salt, you have those 4 different cereals, because it seems that Sam's doesn't even go into... Oh no, it is there. It's just at the very bottom of the salty ones. But then you see where they rank among all of the cereals, and they only occur once. And you could maybe even annotate them and put a little personal story or something of, you know, what does the person like about that cereal? Yeah,
it's a good idea.
Okay. Shall we? I don't know how you are for time. I'm on. It's about 6:10, but did you?
Yeah, I'm cool. You crack on if you feel like it.
Okay. This next one from George. Oh, that has data frame feedback as well, but I haven't seen anyone respond. So let's open that one. Because it's got a lot of stuff in it. And I think maybe we can just make a couple of points, a couple of recommendations on how to simplify this or change it up to make it better.
Okay, yeah, like you say, it's pretty busy. So at the top, we've got some recommended daily amounts, which is cool because I always like that context of understanding, you're telling me I've got 15 grams of sugar in this thing, but how much am I supposed to have overall? So I think augmenting the data set with that full stop would be really, really useful because you talked about relatable stuff earlier. And that is that context of, is this half my allowance in the day gone by 8 o'clock in the morning or what? So it would have been great to see those recommendations actually fully incorporated into this. And the thing that slightly confuses me is this inconsistency across this middle section. So I get the idea of having the average rating by manufacturer, but this middle section, we've got 5 cereals in the highest sugar content category, but then it's scrunched down and we've still got 5 different products for carbs, but then that's a different size to the 5 for fat, which is the similar size to the fiber. But then for the calorie content, we've got more cereals. And it just feels inconsistent. It jumps about. And why is some of it green and why is some of it brown? And why is it some of it a different shade of green? It doesn't make any sense in terms of consistency.
Yeah, and then we've got the scatter plot, and I probably agree that the only one that's actually healthy, that's green, is Quaker Oats, and the rest is not so healthy. But who says that? And then we've got the nutrition facts, which is to be honest, a pretty poor image because some of it is clearly text overlaid on the image and then the image is quite blurry. So I think if you want to use that kind of design, you have to design it from scratch so it all looks like, the same. Like every line should look neat and tidy.
Yeah, and the scatter plot doesn't have any axes, so that makes it hard to read. So again, there's this general thread through this is just care and attention again. So we've had a couple today where it's a bit sloppy, just the sizing consistent and things like that.
Okay. So then I think, okay, we've done enough scatter plots. I'm going to skip those next ones. But then we've got Akriti. There's like this Sankey-ish chart. So I think we'll have a quick look at that one. And okay, I'm going to zoom in because I don't understand why there is a Sankey and I'm trying to hover over it, but there doesn't seem to be any interactivity on this viz. And I don't know why, but maybe it's the color choice, but also maybe the Sankeys. This makes me think of, we had the Viz 5 initiative about access to contraceptives, and this makes me think of contraceptives. Maybe I'm thinking of like condoms for these rings or something, but this does not make me think of breakfast cereals. And I also don't understand why there are those Sankeys that I can't get any information from. Oh,
no, it's really confusing, isn't it? It takes up like a quarter of the space.
Yeah.
I've got no tooltips. There's these like uniform donuts underneath.
The donuts do have tooltips, but they look very uniform, like you say, but the numbers are different for them, and I just don't understand.
Yeah, and it's like, why are there 5 cereals? Okay, so there's top 5 cereals with most calories and sugar. So it's almost like the Sankey is trying to say, well, look, this is the total number of cereals, but we're just distilling it into the top 5 in these donuts. And then because it's the top 5, they're naturally pretty close. So the segments on the donut are a similar size. So it vaguely makes sense in that respect, but it just doesn't make any sense at all to have this like filtering process taken up with an unnecessarily complex chart. I would just ditch that completely, that top section.
Yeah, and I would say, so Charlie and I make every effort to, give you, really honest feedback, but also to understand the viz you've created. If we cannot understand it, and we're, I would say, average intelligence but highly experienced when it comes to database, if we don't get it, even though we try, then you might need to just change a few things, because if we don't get it, then chances are that an audience who doesn't understand database, or not as much, they're going to be lost, especially when there's no instruction. So I think this one here, maybe rethink what you want people to do, how you want them to interact, hover over the bars. But why should I hover over the bars when there's, well, what I'm assuming is 80 different bars, and I'm hovering and it takes a long time for something to load, and all I see is calories, but I can see that roughly from the axis anyway. And how can I tell that it's my favorite cereal? Because there's no names, no labels.
Yeah, and it's got like synchronized axes for different metrics. So I've got that first category where the tooltip's taking forever, but over 300 calories, and then fewer than 50 grams of sugar. But you shouldn't be comparing calories and sugar on the same scale, because they're different things. So it makes more sense to actually have things on distinct separate axes if you insist on having a dual axis. So again, it's like a questionable decision about the chart choice.
Agreed. Okay. Shall we do one more? I'm just mindful that I've got to make dinner soon, so make sure we can wrap this up. So what viz should we look at? Because
I think you're in control. You choose your...
How about Lokesh at the very top? Because his is quite different. His is a bit of a, kind of choose your own adventure. So let's look at that one. And I'm going to bring this into full screen so we have it in the center of the screen. Zoom in a bit. So this looks like a mobile version. Sugar intake calculator. This is great. Are you someone who calculates sugar intake in every meal? I don't, admittedly, but let's play along. Click start to know which cereal is best suited for you. Okay, let's start. Charlie, how many grams of sugar do you take in your breakfast?
I have no idea. Let's say 5.
Okay, 5. Next. Click next to know the cereal we provide according to your sugar. Okay, so this is basically the General Mills options. These are the cereal options that will suit your need. Okay, let's go back because I want to make a comment here. So instead of saying how many grams of sugar do you take in your breakfast, which isn't grammatically correct, what about saying how many grams of sugar, or what's the maximum amount of sugar you want to have in your breakfast? Because I think that's what the question here really is. So I would reword that. Okay, so here are your options, Charlie. You've got all bran flakes, double checks, grape nuts flakes, and strawberry fruit wheats.
I'm going to go with the bottom one. It sounds good.
It sounds good, doesn't it? Strawberry fruit wheats. Okay, let's click next. I like the user interactivity here. Breakdown of strawberry fruit. Okay, number of cups in one serving. I would get rid of the decimal points here, or make it maybe 1 decimal point. Well, no, actually leave it at 2 because some of them you need the 2. Calories per serving, 90. There you can get rid of the decimal points. So, okay. Now I know the nutritional information, but what do I do now?
Yeah, it's a bit... It's limited. It's like the start of an idea which never completes because it never really gets anywhere. And we had one earlier where you were sort of on the periphery of saying, actually, it'd be really cool if actually you gave me more flexibility to maybe say, I want fat in this range and calories in this range. And so it could be like a proper choose your own adventure book. So you could see that flow through. But with this, I've just said, all right, I want this much sugar and I like the name of that one. And then it's, here's your nutritional information. Well, that's great. But so what, how does that sit compared to all the other products?
And I would say, because it started as a sugar intake calculator, maybe at the end you could say, here's your nutritional information. If you eat a single serve or maybe 2 servings of strawberry wheel things every day, over the course of a week, you have a sugar and, an added sugar intake of XYZ, because in the beginning you're telling us we're going to calculate the sugar intake. So I think it needs to conclude with, well, what's my total sugar intake if this is my cereal of choice for, let's say, a week, or something to that effect. I would just bring it back to the start of sugar intake rather than all of the nutritional information. And then you could say, if this is too much, or if you're willing to do more, like these are the other cereals you could try out, because then it becomes this kind of recommendation engine, I guess, for General Mills.
Yeah, and then a standard nitpicky point from me is that we've got this fixed logo for General Mills at the top, which is one manufacturer, but this isn't limited to just being that brand of cereal. So I'm sure Frosted Flakes or Honey Graham somethings are not made by General Mills, so it's a bit weird to have a fixed logo when there's multiple manufacturers.
Oh, isn't it? Okay, let me see if I go 15 grams. Maybe is Smacks? I thought Kellogg's is Smacks.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Yeah, then you definitely need to. I would just say, it's fine to just limit it to General Mills products. Like, just use it as a filter for everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we'll finish it here. Charlie, are you ready to come back on camera?
Yeah, I'm dressed.
Okay. Excellent, because I think it's always nice to say bye in person. So hopefully everyone enjoyed that and learned a lot. I think we'll have some lessons learned for the end of this week. Charlie, did you get lots of ideas for your own viz?
Yeah, no, I did start looking at it yesterday because I looked at Andy's walkthrough, which everyone should look at as well. And I just bottled it because it just looked a bit busy, and actually what I did was terrible. So I'll have another look tonight or tomorrow.
Yeah, excellent. Sounds good. And then I hope you've got a non-cricket data set for us next week.
I'm as prepared as I was in the week when I did the cricket data set. Let's just say that.
Well, maybe we'll do another call out. We've got 50 people on there live now. So if anyone has a non-cricket data set that they think is great, but it also needs to include a viz. So because if we just have a data set, we've got nothing to make over. So send Charlie a message on Twitter with your suggestion.
Yeah, great idea.
And we will happily put those on our list. And I think it worked out well this week. It's been quite fun.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, good data set. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing it.
Absolutely. So we'll finish it here. Favorites will come out probably on Friday in the usual video format that I've adopted, and some lessons learned. Any final words from you, Charlie?
No, I've got nothing useful to say.
Okay, well, in that case, we'll just end it here. Oh, I would love to hear from people what their favorite cereal is, so maybe they can post it in the comments below the video.
Cool. Good.
Okay, cool. So everyone have a good day, and thanks for participating, and we look forward to all your iterations and new vizzes or renewed vizzes on Twitter.
Cool. See you all next week.
Okay, cool. Bye.